This here is my copy of Willow. I got it on Blu-ray. I had this movie for a few years. I think I got it on sale some Black Friday or something. But I must say, this is my first time watching this version. Willow was released in 1988. It was written by George Lucas and directed by Ron Howard. It stars Warwick Davis, who is probably most known for his role as the Leprechaun. But I actually watched Willow well before Leprechaun. And every time I hear the Leprechaun talk, I just think it's Willow. Now, on the surface, Willow has a lot going for it. The writer, the director, the Leprechaun. This movie should have been great. But to be honest, at best, this movie's just okay. And even though I had this movie as a kid, I never really watched it much. I think what kept me from watching this movie again and again is just the fact that it's so boring. A lot of the scenes are longer than they need to be, and some of the build-ups in the beginning of the movie don't really have any payoff. So before I go too far, I want to make sure that everybody knows this. Willow and Willow's people, they're Elwyn, I think, or it almost sounds like it's like a spin-off word of Elvin, doesn't it? I think they're Elwyns. Yeah, Willow and his people are Elwyn, which are like little smaller people. They're a little bit like hobbits. And to be honest with you, when I first watched the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings, I was surprised they didn't go this route with the hobbits. But I'm kind of glad they didn't. That way it kind of has its own like identity. So the movie starts with actually a pretty good premise. You've got this queen who's worried about a newborn baby girl who's going to grow up and is destined to destroy the queen and her kingdom. So she orders the baby to be killed. The midwife actually rescues the baby and takes it away. She puts the baby on a raft and sends it downstream. Willow's two kids end up finding the baby on shore. By the way, look at Willow's kids. These two are just the cutest kids, I think, in any movie. Willow's first reaction is actually just to let the baby keep going down the river and pretend he never saw it. But once his wife finds out the baby's there, of course, she has to keep it. Willow and his family find out that this is actually a Daikini baby, and Daikinis are like normal-sized people, so much taller than Elwyn. So Willow and his family end up taking the baby to the elders of the village, kind of like a wizard character. They decide that Willow needs to take the baby out of the village and find some Daikini to give the baby to so it could be raised by its own people. And in this scene, they kind of assign people to help Willow. Willow's best friend offers to go with him, as well as kind of the village warrior. This guy here, Burglecut, actually gets assigned to help Willow, and this character is hilarious. And I love the dynamic between Willow and Burglecut. They don't like each other. Burglecut just only wants to see whatever's worst happen to Willow, and it makes for some good chemistry between the two characters. I actually like this dynamic. I should probably back up just a little bit to explain that. Willow is also like an aspiring wizard. He's kind of a lousy wizard at this point, but he kind of learns as he goes through the movie. Well, before he and the rest of the villagers venture off to help find a Daikini to give this baby to, the main wizard of the village gives Willow some acorns that anybody he throws them at will turn to stone. Willow's wife also gives him a lock of her hair, which is kind of a nice sentimental moment between the two of the characters. So we've got Willow, like an aspiring wizard who has these cool acorns. We've got the village warrior. We've got Willow's best friend, and the asshole who just hates Willow. And I'm super excited for this. I mean, at this point, I'm ready to start exploring the world through these characters that we've spent the last 30 minutes or so kind of learning and getting to know. But for some reason, this movie decides to totally shift gears, and after their first stop, just about all the characters go away. For some reason, they decide to stop by these cages, and inside one of these cages is Madmartigan, played by Val Kilmer. He's kind of a rough around the edges guy, very mean, like intimidating kind of a guy, especially with these little people. By the way, he's like trapped in a cage, like he's a prisoner trapped there to die. And he's like demanding water from these people that he should be, quite frankly, much nicer to, but for some reason they wanted to make him mean, so he's mean. I guess it wouldn't be much of a character arc if he started out nice and then ended out nice. So they have him start mean, and for some reason he's mean while imprisoned and desperate for his life. Anyway, everyone in the group decides that this Daikini person is the perfect person to take care of the baby. They have no idea why he's imprisoned. They're just desperate to leave him with the baby so they can go back home. The only ones who are against this are Willow and his best friend Migosh. So the rest of the entire group, other than Willow and his friend, just leave. They're done. And I was thinking, oh, they'll be back, it's fine. But no, they never come back for the rest of the movie. Willow and Migosh end up staying the night right next to this prisoner. So the scene goes on for another 10 minutes while they stay the night and have a whole nother day with this guy in the prison. And then they just end up letting him out and giving him the baby anyway. So the whole scene was prolonged like 5 or 10 minutes to have them do the next day what they were planning on not doing the previous day. Well, after the two of them give the baby to Madmartigan, the prisoner, they head back home too. But on their way, they're captured by these like even tinier little things called brownies. The brownies actually stole the baby from Madmartigan to, I guess, rescue the baby, and then end up tying up Willow and Migosh. What ends up saving the two of them is this like weird forest fairy or something. She shows herself, and then she orders the brownies to let the two of them go, and she entrusts Willow to go find a home for this Daikini baby. So Willow decides to take the baby by himself. He sends his friend Migosh back home, and Migosh actually leaves. So now we just have Willow. So we spent the first nearly hour of this movie getting to know these characters to just have them all go. And instead, the movie gives us these two brownies to follow Willow around, which pretty much only act as the comic relief. I thought this might be a really good opportunity to have the other people who had already left, the Warrior and Burglecut, come back to save Willow and Migosh and kind of go forward from there. But no, the movie just abandons all the characters that we've seen so far. So Willow takes the baby with the two brownie characters onward to try to find this Daikini baby a home. And on the way, he finds Mad Mardigan again. So now they go back and forth about who should watch the baby, how irresponsible are you for losing the baby, and yada yada yada. While at the same time, the queen sent out her daughter Sorsha, the princess, to try and capture the baby. So now Mad Mardigan and Willow are forced to kind of work together in order to escape Sorsha. Sometimes Sorsha captures them and takes them, but then they escape, and then sometimes they capture Sorsha, but Sorsha escapes. They go back and forth between who's capturing who, that it's easy to get lost in the movie too. Also, along their way, kind of in between them being captured or not being captured, they end up finding Rizal, who's a very powerful wizard, to help them, but she can't help them because she's stuck as a possum. I guess magic doesn't work anymore if you're a wizard, but now you're a possum wizard. I don't know. So Willow, not being a very good wizard himself, tries to do some charm to turn her back into her original form, but he ends up turning her into like a raven or something. Later on in the movie, he tries again, but still he's not very good, so he turns her into a goat. And I guess it's kind of funny having like a wizard follow you around like in different forms throughout the movie. I can imagine as a kid watching that, kind of being entertained. But again, where's Burglecut? Where's his friend? Where's the warrior that we met? I don't mind getting new characters, but can I keep the ones that we already liked from way in the beginning of the movie? Now, at some point in the movie, the queen ends up actually capturing the baby. So now, Willow, Mad Mardigan, and Rizal need to go to the queen's castle in order to get the baby back. Well, along their way, they team up with like a whole army of people willing to help them. Also along the way, Mad Mardigan and Sorsha end up falling in love. So Sorsha switches sides, and now she wants to help Willow and the team. I guess they kind of needed to also cram a love story in the movie somehow, and this is how they kind of do it. So they're at the gates of the castle. The entire army is ready to siege the castle with the queen. So the queen, who also has powers, turns everybody into a pig. And we get some really cool effects of kind of people transitioning into a pig. But Willow, who in the meantime has been practicing all of his sorcery skills, is now able to turn Rizal back into her original form. She casts a spell and turns everybody from a pig back into a human, negating the previous 10 minutes of the movie. So now the whole army is finally ready to siege the castle. So we've got Mad Mardigan down in the combat area, kind of fighting everybody with swordplay, and we've got Willow and Rizal up in the tower with the queen kind of using magic to fight each other. You know, like a traditional sword and sorcery ending. You got sword downstairs and you got sorcery upstairs. That's how it works. It's not a new recipe, it's just this movie's just doing it again, that's all. So the queen ends up taking out Rizal, so now it's down to Willow. So Willow reaches into his pocket and pulls out those acorns that we've been dying to see him use this entire movie. He throws it at the queen, she catches it, her arm starts to turn to stone, but then she undoes it and kind of shakes it away. And that's what this movie does constantly, is it'll set something up and then immediately later it'll just be like, oh, never mind, that doesn't matter. We meet Willow and all of his friends and people who are willing to help him, and then they all go away a half hour later. The brownies capture Willow and his friend, only for them just to let him go, and now they're his friends. The queen turns all of the soldiers into pigs, only to have it undone in the next scene. Anyway, enough of that rant. We still have the queen. So the queen ends up wandering too close to the ceremonial little table over here. She gets struck by lightning, and then she turns into some pink dust and kind of gets absorbed into the air. Sorsha and Mad Mardigan get married, and now that the queen's dead, Sorsha is the queen, which makes Mad Mardigan the king, and Willow finally makes his way home, where we get to see all the characters that we've been missing this entire movie. I know I seem kind of nitpicky when I kind of give the gist of the movie. That's not to say that this is a bad movie. I guess the nitpickiness just kind of comes from me expecting a little bit more from this movie. This is a good movie, but it could be so much better. I wish that a lot of the things that were set up in the beginning and the middle throughout this entire movie paid off a little bit better. I'm supposed to assume that Willow's good friend Migosh just left him high and dry and said, okay, peace, I'm out of here. Like, come on. We could have had a scene where his friend came to save him at some point. We could have had a scene where maybe his wife's hair helped him get through a really tough moment. We could have had more scenes where he was actually using the acorns and chucking them at people. But we don't. We get a really well-crafted movie with shoddy writing. It makes for a lot of the scenes to be longer than they need to be. The lack of payoffs from the setups is underwhelming. And all of it hurts so much knowing that at its heart, this is a good fantasy movie. This movie actually got some flack for being a little too similar to Star Wars. And I was actually really surprised to see that. I can see kind of how maybe, when they're using their magic, maybe they're using the Force. Maybe this is like an undiscovered world in the Star Wars universe. I can kind of see that, but it more reminds me of like Lord of the Rings with the hobbits and the kind of the different characters throughout this whole world. So, I mean, what do you think? Do you think this is more like Star Wars, or do you think this is more like Hobbit or Lord of the Rings? Leave some comments. Let me know what you think. Did I miss something? Until next time, keep watching movies.